Ms. Mercado, can you hear me?
Will be live streamed on the school board's YouTube channel. Requests for public comments will be accepted between 8 and 8:30 by sending an email with your name, phone number, and topic to Robin Cushenberry. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
Second. It's been moved by Ms. Boatright, seconded by Ms. Middleton early in the morning. And are there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And Mr. Dallas
Aye.
and Miss Hay. Dr. Wisniewski.
Wisniewski, yes.
Okay.
Hey, aye. Sorry, I was
Aye.
having technical difficulties.
Got it. Thank you. So we have 9, 8 and 3 absent voted aye. And so the motion passes to approve the agenda. The first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in standing. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence, and in our thoughts and prayers this morning, our fellow board member, Dr. Draw's mother is ill. That's why she cannot be here. Thank you very much. Statement of media notification as it has been notified. Thank you. There are no public comments. The first item on the agenda is board determination on the appeals from the Materials Reconsideration Committee reports on the following books. The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta, Burn by Ellen Hopkins, Clockwood Princess by Cassandra Clare, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran IV. Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. Out of Darkness by Ashley Hope Perez. Rumble by Ellen Hopkins. Smoke by Ellen Hopkins. The Truth About Alice by Jennifer Matthew. And Water for Elephants by Sarah Gurin. So, I'm sorry. We don't have any public comments. So, discussion on the appeals. The board members have gotten the a notification. Do you have any comments? Anybody online have any comments?
Has there been a motion?
Hasn't been one yet.
Okay, thank you.
No comments here, sir.
Do I have a motion on as how this should be handled this morning?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that the board vote to approve the recommendations of the committee.
And seconded by Ms. Boatright. Now for discussion. Dr. Wisniewski, your hand is up.
I don't think my hand's up. Sorry, I'll
Oh,
double check.
Okay. Hearing no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Nay. That's two,
Wisniewski, nay.
three. Three nay. Gives it. Five, three, and three absent. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the budget presentation.
I voted. I voted. I didn't hear you, huh? Oh, I apologize. I voted in favor of Mrs. Christianberry and Mr. Colonel Guy. I voted in favor of it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, sir.
The next item is the budget presentation by Ms. Tanya Crosby.
Good morning, board members. And those who are with us virtually, thank you for the opportunity this morning to begin the very detailed discussions of our 23-24 school year budget. So this is the general fund budget that we'll be discussing today. And we have a lot of details for you. One of the things that I'm going to be doing is referencing the handouts as well. And so there are more details in the handouts than the presentation. And there are some really good narratives about the explanations of the increases and decreases. I'll be going over some of those, but those are available for your reference as well. So we began the budget process this year with a campaign of feedback. So we began, really this was something different for us. We typically get feedback in the middle of the process with student advisory, and then late in the process after we've already built the presentation, after this meeting would actually occur. So one of our staff members actually recommended that we begin early at the beginning of the process to get that feedback. And I mentioned it, I have mentioned it a few times to you all, that we use the Bang the Table app that Communications has established on our website. And it actually was able to be rolled out via text message to student groups or to parents, to community groups, and students were able, if they were to see them as well, to give feedback on it as well. We got a lot of feedback early on, and some of the major categories or priorities from their feedback really emerged. And I have 3 categories for you here, which really signify basically some of the major goals, major strategic goals that the district already has. So obviously, student achievement is the core of our work. So that's our primary focus. But teacher quality is one of the second priorities, and safety and security is always at the forefront as well, to make sure the climate is healthy from our student and staff perspective, and that we have things in place to make people feel safe and secure in our schools. So really the financial strategy, I think I've also shown this one before as well, but these are sort of our core principles, that are guiding principles. Thank you. As we go through the budget process, we prioritize our expenditures, and which we have done. We're maximizing our revenues as well, and you'll see that today. There is a board policy that we will balance the budget, so you will see a balanced budget today. That we maintain a fund balance between 15 and 17%. We are in that range of 17%, and that we minimize tax increases where possible. So just to begin, the big picture summary of this slide is revenues. The next one is expenditures. And then we'll dive deeper into the categories of local revenues and state revenues and so on, and then expenditures as well. So today, what we are displaying is that there is projected to be local revenue for next year based on the current mill rate that we have of 125.6 operations mills. We project that we would generate $190,980,995. State revenue is projected to be, and these are based on House projections. We haven't made it to this. We haven't received any Senate finance or Senate projections yet. So those could change a little based on, I think, only based on enrollment. So changes in enrollment from the 45-day to the 135-day. But those state revenues right now are projected to be $119 million. So again, this state local revenue is about 62% of all the revenues. State revenue is about 37%. So you got about 2/3, 1/3 of funding. And then a little bit of federal revenue from impact aid and E-rate in the general fund. And then some transfers in from special revenue, which some of that is state funding, or if there are indirect costs coming from COVID, ESSER funds, and so on. So total projected revenues that we will have without raising any millage is $313.8 million. In this budget, due to the proposed expenditures of $320.4 million, we are requesting an increase of 4.4 additional mills, which will generate $6.6 million and allow us to balance this budget. That is at an estimated value of the mill for the school district of $1.5 million per mill. So I'm going to go into a little more detail on the millage, so that will allow us to take a deeper dive there and hopefully help those that aren't as familiar with the millage and how that works, and maybe some of our viewers as well. Our handout, page 3, includes some of the details about revenues. It's a very detailed line by line, local tax revenue, state tax revenue. So if you're interested in particular in those, Robin has it displayed for us here. I'm not going to go over anything particular because I see it's very small, but it is available in board docs. But those show the changes, and some of the significant changes that you see from year to year are the new funding formula. They were in this pot of money last year, and now they're coming in this pot. And so that's some of the changes that you'll see. But I'll take a little bit deeper dive into local and state revenues here shortly. And so on the proposed expenditures, the current year's budget is $298.1 million. That is the approved budget for the 2022-23 school year. So in this budget, we're proposing $22.3 million of increases. 79% of them are employee compensation increases. And so employee compensation would be teacher salaries, they'd be classified professional and administrative salaries, as well as benefit increases that are mandated from the state. So 17.6 million make up that number. School staffing allocations are 1.1 million, operational increases of about 4 million. And we had some charter school decreases of about 400,000. And I'll go into some details shortly about those. So total proposed expenditures based on the House proposal is $320.4 million. So again, this is a balanced budget, and we are proposing with the 4.4 mil increase that we're proposing or recommending, it would be 130.0 mils. And so projected revenues and expenditures would balance at 320.4. Our ending fund balance is projected to be 58.7 million, and it would be a 17.4%. So it's just a hair outside of that range, and 61 days of operations. So the government, one of our guiding organizations that we take our standards of practice from is the Government Finance Officers Association. So it's for municipalities, other governmental entities, as well as school districts. And their recommendation is 60 days of no less than 60 days of operation. So we're slightly above that, which would be a positive thing in terms of our fund balance and the advantage of keeping our fund balance. I don't go into details about that today, but there are some definite advantages of keeping that fund balance at a level. One, we don't have to borrow additional funding for just maintaining the operations in the form of a tax anticipation note. And the other is to have for our credit rating, making sure that we have a strong credit rating, and keeping a healthy fund balance helps to support a good credit rating, at least staying where we are in terms of the AA1 credit rating as we're going out for issuing bonds. And this afternoon, we'll be talking about a referendum. So it's going to be very important if the board chooses to move forward and in the community support of the referendum. That would be critical to make sure that we're in the best possible financial position in the spring as we would begin to issue bonds for that referendum. So that is one of the main pieces of importance for the fund balance. And so we'll talk more about that going forward. I talk about it almost every time I get a chance. All right, so I'm going to take a deep dive into local revenues. And you'll see the 62% local, 37% state revenues. And so that is a byproduct of Beaufort County's wealth. The assessed value of all of the properties in the county is such that the state has the fundings of formula that they provide. It encompasses or includes an index of tax paying ability. Therefore, due to Beaufort's wealth, we receive less state funding, less percentages of state funding than many other school districts, most other school districts in the state. So we have to rely on that local piece in order to be able to balance the budget, and sometimes even to help fund some of the mandates that the state is passing through to us, such as teacher salaries and other mandates. So if you were to look at another school district, you wouldn't necessarily see that blue category. It's quite as large as ours, but that is due to the assessed values of our county. So 99% of our local revenues are property taxes. And in order to generate those property taxes, there is a formula dictated by the assessor's office and state law. And it includes three components. And there's a good explanation in my notes here, and I wanted to include those. Millage is one of the three primary factors in determining property tax levies, the others being fair market value and the assessment ratio. The millage is applied and calculated in terms of mills per dollar. 1 mill equals 1/10 of a cent, or 1,000th of a dollar. So, so these three components are used in a calculation. And I've always wanted to put this sample tax bill on the, I know it looks complicated, but I just have a few points to put out here. So this is sort of this is a $230,000 home and property. It is a primary residence. And the value, if in the top right corner, you have an appraised value, but it's also a capped value. So from year to year, there's a certain percentage that a home can't increase above a cap. So they cap the amount. I think the rate's 15% or something like that. And so the value, they would cap the value at that, say 15%, for example. And so you'll see the capped value of $221,000. You multiply that by the assessment ratio, which is one of the other gears on the previous slide, the components of the calculation. So 221,000 times 4% gives you the taxable value of $8,870. Okay, and then that's $8,870 is then applied to the millage amount, which is you see in the thousandth of a percent there. That's why we're talking about mill means I think it's 1/1,000,000th or 1/1,000,000th of a cent. So they have moved the decimal point basically over. So you'll see two line items on this tax bill are for school purposes: school operations, which is highlighted in yellow, and school debt. And so you'll see that school operations is 0.1256. That's the 125.6 mils at the millionth decimal point. So that 125 mils, so we can slide down to the bottom. We've taken the magnifying glass and blown up that category at school operations, 125.6 mils, $8,870 taxable value for school operations is $0. That is because of Act 388, and we receive $0 in school operations tax for a primary residence that is assessed at a 4% ratio. So, but we do still pay school debt. So the school debt has a millage rate of 36.3, and everyone in the county pays school debt service taxes. And those debt service taxes go toward the payoff of the mortgage payments on our bond issues. So that goes in a separate pot. It directly goes to pay principal and interest payments on our debt. So I just wanted to show sort of the details about what that tax bill looks like and what all of these things mean. And so any increases in this millage today that we're discussing would move 125.6 mils to 130 as we propose. It would have zero impact on a 4% taxpayer on a tax bill such as this. So I'm going to pause there in case you have any questions on that. So I hope that's helpful for you.
Dr. Wisniewski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you have a sample tax bill for a 6% taxpayer or a business?
I don't have one today, no, but I do have some, later on in the presentation, I do have what the impact would be on a taxpayer, of a 6% taxpayer at two different, a value of a $250,000 property and a $400,000 property. But I could certainly.
Yeah, I can reserve my questions for then. Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Yes, sir. And just to go even deeper in that, I know different areas pay more heavier taxes due to different like we're being in rural areas. So can we get a breakdown of that as well?
This county website has a breakdown of different districts in the county, so different taxing districts. So this one is just one area of the county. So there are many, many taxing districts of the county, fire districts in particular, that would be affected. So that would be something I could probably get you a link to the county's website to be able to help break that down for you. It would list the schools on there as well, but it won't show the effect of what our tax impact would be or.
Right, and that's what I'm looking for. And also, I know, like I said, in some areas of the county that are rural, that are known as rural areas, and that there's no development going on. The taxes that they pay are just as high than some taxpayers in other areas who have those $400,000 homes. So therefore, that's why I wanted that information as well. To see, I want to see when we move the millage rate, how does that affect them as well? What does that look like?
There would be no effect on the other millage rates that are on a tax bill, only on the line item that we are proposing for school operations. So the impact of any changes in the other, like county operations or fire district or rural and critical lands, those are under the responsibility and authority of county council, and they would determine what that millage rate would be for each annual year. And I'm sure that they are discussing that throughout their budget process at this point as well.
Okay, thank you. I digest what you've given me. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? Ms. Boatright?
Mm-hmm.
You talking to Mike?
Do we only get $650,000 from the federal government when you factor in like the electronics? I forget all the acronyms. You factor in Title I, all that. That seems low to me.
So, so that's a two-part. So their electronics would be E-rate reimbursements, and there are two categories of E-rate or a couple of categories of E-rate reimbursements. One that is related to telephone services that we pay utilities for directly out of the general fund. The E-rate reimbursements for telephone services come back into the general fund, and that's what you're seeing here. When we upgrade and do millions of dollars of upgrades on network electronics, those are paid for with 8% funds and come back into the 550 pot, come back into those capital project funds and then we utilize them to help support the next upgrade of network electronics. So that's the one part of the question. Title I, IDEA, and other federal funds are in our special revenue funds and are not part of this budget. They have their own separate budgets. Title I budgets are prepared at we do a district-wide allocation to schools based on a formula required by the state to distribute to Title I schools and get plans for, and then we monitor. Each one is different. Perkins funds are federal funds that are managed by the Career and Technology Education Office. And so they're all separate restricted funds for specific purposes. So we can't use them for teacher salaries in the general fund sort of thing.
So they're not all captured in that 650,000.
Correct.
Okay. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yes, they're a whole nother pot. And in a future meeting, I'll show you the big picture of all of our budgets. So this is just sort of one column, and we have about 6 more out there that are special revenue, EIA, debt service, capital projects has its own funds, student activities. And so I believe that's about it. So there are multiple other funding sources. This is just one component of our budget. The others have either restricted fund budgets or debt service has a budget based on the bonds that are issued. Capital projects has a budget that the board approves based on 8% in capital and so on. So there's a whole lot. This is a piece of the puzzle. There's a lot bigger. Overall, we probably have more of a $650 million budget district-wide for all of the projects that we have. And this is about half of that. So
Seeing no other hands up or questions, would you please go on?
sure. All right. The next slide is just demonstrating to you under Act 388, state law gives us a limit or a cap to the available millage that we can increase from one year to the other. I'm just displaying that. I display it every year to make sure that all know what we have available to us by state law. We have no obligation to use all of the funds or any for that matter, but we do want to make sure these are taken into consideration each time we budget and have discussions of potential proposed millage increases. So our current assessed millage is 125.6, as we saw in the tax bill. What was left over from last year's budget was 4.7 mils. So we have, it's also called a look back. We can look back as much as 3 years, but we only have 1 year to look back because they were exhausted prior to that date due to reassessment issues in a past year. So the new millages available is 13.3 mils. This is made up of two things: a very high CPI increase of 8%, and a growth factor of 2.6%. So that equates to, you have to apply those percentages, multiply it by the 125.6 to get the numbers we see here.
Okay, CPI means inflation.
Consumer Price Index, yes, sir. So 8% CPI, Consumer Price Index, or inflationary amounts is the highest I have seen in my career. We are not likely to see that number next year. So that is sort of an unprecedented rate that we don't expect to see in future years. It has already come down. I have a chart in a graph in the presentation to show where we are at this point. But combined with the look back millage, so 4.7 from last year, 13.3 for this year available, gives us a total available millage of 18 mils. So maximum mills available would be 143.6. So although these mills are available under state law, we're recommending a more conservative approach. So the 4.4 mils uses almost all of the look back mills that we're proposing. So it would leave 0.3 mils from the look back, and then we would still have all of the new millage available and going forward. And there's a few reasons why we would want to be conservative here. One is we are in pretty uncertain economic times. We have a lot of inflation. It appears to be coming down, but costs are still high. There's talks of recession. Are we in a recession? Are we not? And, we have the end of the ESSER funds coming up in a year, a little over a year. So there's a lot of funds that have been infused into the economy that will no longer be there by the end of September of 2024. But also we want to make sure that we are, there's another aspect of it. We want to be sure that we're bringing forward a fiscally responsible budget. It's providing a fiscally responsible budget provides a strong evidence that our organization is able to and capable of autonomously managing our finances. So we want to ensure that we are making strong, legitimate, responsible decisions to keep taxes low when we can, but also to maximize our needs and be able to fund those needs. This slide is a historical operations millage. So our goal from year to year is to minimize the impact. But as you see, we do want a stable, we're going to need increases because of the funding from the state not being sufficient to cover many of the state mandates. So there is a reliance on local tax revenues. We do want that those increases in millage to be gradual and steady. We don't like to see dips and valleys and mountains on the track of how we get there. The dip you see down to 104.6 mils was our last reassessment year. The rollback millage took us back almost 9 mils. And the next year we found, after having a $9.2 million tax revenue shortfall that year, we had to increase all of those mills back the next year, which exhausted all of our 3 years of look back millage. So we don't want to be in a position where we have to do that again. So we're working regularly with our county counterparts to make sure we're in agreement with our rollback millage calculations, which are beginning to be calculated now. And I'm having constant discussions with the county staff to make sure we have some input in that process. So we do want to avoid those large fluctuations. And after reassessment, we want to have the best possible outcomes. And as part of that, we want to make sure that all factors are taken into consideration with regard to those calculations. In particular, the shifts from 6% to 4%. Those shifts become very drastic during a reassessment year because the property values are increased, the taxes are higher, and there are more people coming forward to request a 4% primary residence and establish their home in Beaufort County to be their primary residence as opposed to their other home somewhere else. So that it is much larger. That shift is much larger in a reassessment year, and therefore we want to make sure that factor is taken into consideration so that we don't see this sort of fluctuation again.